Let's begin by talking about a subject that is hot on South Africans' lips here, nationalisation. But you're talking a very different type of nationalisation, a sort of necessary nationalisation, if you like. The central bank considering nationalising some of those banks that were rescued last year.
Yeah, morning, Godfrey. Essentially, what happened is, the CBN governor was in South Africa last week, and that was where he actually made those statements. And the bottom line is, as opposed to when the CBN reinforced the liquidation threat, it's actually just downplaying that option and letting the market know that its preference is for nationalization as opposed to a liquidation of these banks. So AMCON, which was established sometime last year, would actually be the tool, or should I say the vehicle for nationalization, when that happens come September 30. Should any of those banks not find an M&A partner. That's essentially what's going on.
Yeah, so let's be clear about which banks we're talking about here. We've got 8 banks that are at the center of this. And from your own research, 3 are quite very clear about what they need to do to raise capital. The other 5 are the ones that have this specter of nationalization hanging over them. How real is the threat, do you think, that they will be nationalized?
I think the threat is minimal, to be, in my opinion, and that's largely driven by the statements we've heard from a few of those banks, which are yet to announce anything firm at this point in time. Oceanic Bank has announced that in a couple of weeks it should announce its M&A partner. The other one is Spring Bank. It made an announcement yesterday, and it should come out in the next couple of weeks, with the bank or banks or parties it's having discussions with. But I think the more important thing to focus on is the fact that these banks need to speed up whatever discussions they're having. They really can't hold on, much longer than they are doing at this point in time. There are statutory limits as to when you need to hold certain meetings, when this kind of deals are happening. So these banks need to, this month, July or early August, they need to firm up whatever transactions or discussions they're having, and let the market know what exactly it is they're doing. They need to get SEC approval. They need to hold shareholder meetings. These things need to happen quickly. September 30 is less than 3 months away. Yeah,
indeed, there's no time. But the central bank itself has been very clear and said that was the last resort, and it's not a resort that they'd like to take as a first option. But in terms of what the Nigerian economy needs and what the Nigerian banking sector needs to avoid the whole system being threatened, what would be best? Nationalization or allowing these banks to try and raise the capital on their own?
The best option really is for these banks to raise capital, or raise capital or find someone to buy them out.
Is it available?
That's the best option. Those options exist, and I would not like to believe that Spring Bank or Oceanic Bank will make statements to the public which are false. Okay, so I would like to believe that those discussions are actually ongoing. There are still interested parties. So, yeah, I believe discussions are going on. There are still interested parties. It's just a matter of time before these discussions are unveiled to the public. That's the best option. What you need to understand is these banks, in as much as they're intervening banks and they're looking, the banking sector is really polarized at this point in time, and they are the lower end. You need to understand that these banks to control at least a third of deposits in the Nigerian banking industry. That's huge. Okay, so there needs to be a resolution which would, to a larger extent, salvage these banks going forward.
Yeah, talking about AMCON, maybe let's just take this opportunity to talk about what AMCON has done to date. We know it was set up to recapitalize some of those banks that were rescued last year. What business has it done? Has it been effective in doing what it was set up to do?
Yes, the most important thing about AMCON's establishment was to clean up the Nigerian bank's asset quality issues. And AMCON has done that. It's done that to a very large extent, successfully, and very generously in our view. And it's done it in 2 tranches. They did one in December, did another one in March. The impact of what they did in March, we should see that filter through in half-year earnings results. The other key thing AMCON is doing at the moment is it's having discussions with banks to deal with a couple of their lumpy NPLs, which might pose risk to the system. That should be finalized sometime in Q3, and should actually help probably bring NPLs to the 5% CBN I was talking about.
Yeah.
So a very successful job AMCON has done so far.
Which is good, I suppose. But at the same time, we're seeing the banking sector under pressure on the Nigerian stock exchange. I mean, in the last few days, we have seen maximum losses on some of those banks that were rescued. Are you getting a sense that investors are beginning to be jittery about this and we could likely see some more losses on the banking front? Or are we at that stage where perhaps value is so irresistible that we'll see some of those shares coming up?
You see, our opinion on Renaissance has been, investors in those banks should not start getting jittery today. You should have started getting jittery a whole while back, not today. A lot of things have happened in those banks, and a whole lot is still going to happen. But before, the more important thing is that the system is stable. That's the Nigerian banking system. The system is moving forward. September 30 is a deadline, and a number of things are going to happen. But the more important thing is to focus on is that for the cleaner banks, market share is moving in their favor. You can check the trends between 2009 and 2010. They've actually gained market share, especially the tier 2 banks. And going forward, the intervened banks, they're going to have to do a whole lot more work to let investors know that anything positive is happening at their banks. Okay, a lot of things will still happen. Share dilutions, capital reconstruction. There are a lot of scenarios that that could potentially play out.
So what's your stance then on those rescued banks? What would you be advising investors to do right now?
Yeah, pretty much stay away from them. Okay, you have 23, 24 banks in Nigeria. You have about 14 that are clean, and about 90% of those are listed. Okay, you have a decent number of banks to play with. You have the big four. You have a portfolio of tier 2 banks. Yeah. So we are looking to play on the long-term Nigerian growth story. You have a good number of banks you can actually stick to, and these banks are actually increasing market share. Our top picks still remain First Bank and Zenith, and among the tier 2 space, in the tier 2 space, we are looking at Skybank. Those three, I think, they give you a decent exposure to the long-term Nigerian growth story, from profitability and growth trend.